Well, hello, welcome. Here we are again. It is time for another In Conversation with Jennie and Mark, and we're really delighted that you're listening again. So we're going to crack on because we've got two readings to look at tonight. One of which I am looking at because it's Harvest at St Margaret's on Sunday. And Jennie, what are you doing?
I am doing Mark 10, 2 to 16 because it is the 19th Sunday after Trinity.
So basically, you're just really good and doing all of the Sundays after Trinity, and we've started going all over the place, really, what you're saying.
Yeah, of course, I'm always good.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So, well, we better crack on then, haven't we? So we're going to be about 15 minutes on each. So we're going to look at Mark 10 first,
Okay,
which
are
is
you going to read Mark
an
10 and then
interesting
we'll talk?
subject, which it's going to get us into. So then we will talk. So this is Mark 10 and verses 1 to 16. Jesus left that place and went to the region of Judea and beyond the Jordan, and crowds again gathered around him. And as was his custom, he again taught them. Some Pharisees came, and to test him, they asked, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife?" He answered them, "What did Moses command you?" They said, "Moses allowed a man to write a certificate of dismissal and to divorce her." But Jesus said to them, "Because of your hardness of heart, he wrote this commandment for you. But from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate." Then in the house, the disciples asked him again about this matter. He said to them, "Whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. And if she divorces her husband and marries another, she commits adultery." People were bringing little children to him in order that he might touch them, and the disciples spoke sternly to them. But when Jesus saw this, he was indignant and said to them, "Let the little children come to me. Do not stop them, for it's to such as these that the kingdom of God belongs. Truly I tell you, whoever does not receive the kingdom of God as a little child will never enter it." And he took them up in his arms, laid his hands on them, and blessed them. So obviously, Jenny, we're going to ignore that difficult first part of the reading and just look at that lovely Sunday school verse about "let the children come to me," aren't we? Is that right?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Well, Jesus just
Absolutely good. I'm
calling
glad we
all
got
the
that sorted
children.
out.
Sorted.
Let
No,
us deal with that one.
we are definitely not. We're going to look at the first part actually more than the second part.
Okay. I think it's fair to say, although I guess most people who know us will know this, that this is interesting for us because we have been married a year, actually next week, but previously to that, we are both divorced. I've been divorced for 4.5 years, and you've been divorced for a bit longer than that, haven't you, from your first marriage?
20 years.
20 years. Yeah, okay.
About 20
A little
years.
bit longer, yeah.
Just a
So
little bit.
obviously, we bring our own perspective to this, and here we are. We are both ordained in the Church of England. The Church of England accepts our ordination and has allowed us to continue in ministry, for which we're very grateful. But this passage is there for an interesting one, isn't it? So do you want to take us into it then, Jenny?
Okay, yeah, it is always a difficult one, and it's one of the reasons that I insist is too strong a word, but I like to preach on it because I have not always been treated well by the church because of my divorce, and I feel that if other people come across that sort of treatment, then I want to make my stand and stand with them. So I do, as much as possible, don't run away, not to run away from this passage. I like to hit it head on as much as I can. Having said that, I am just going to embarrass you, really. Many years ago, I'll tell everybody that you sat down and said, I'm going to preach this week when we worked together. And I laughed at you because I knew that this passage was coming up. And you stood up and preached, I'm going to say, the best sermon I've possibly heard. And
I think we should just say to people, yes, we did work together about 10 years ago, and
yeah.
That's when that was. And then yeah, so carry on.
It was a church where you preached for 40 minutes. I never preached for 40 minutes. So what I've taken really is the bits that stood out to me that day that I remembered. I didn't have a notebook with me, so obviously they're the bits that hit home. And basically take those and reflect a bit more on those and use those as the basis of what I would normally
This
say.
is slightly scary because I don't. I'm sure I've got it in my notes somewhere, but I do remember preaching it. I do remember doing it, but I'm not. I
Yeah,
don't.
it was the days when you didn't write them out, so I bet you've got no idea really of what you said. um, so I'm going to start from the top. It's not a pastoral situation, and actually, I think that's really important to notice. Really important to recognise. This is not a person that's been divorced coming to Jesus. This is them debating, which is what they did all the time. They debated theology and what was right and what was wrong. And this was another trying to catch him out, but basically be part of a debate because that's what they liked to do. And I think it's really important to say that because how we deal with a debate is very different language to how we deal with a pastoral situation. There's the bit that I always think is possibly obvious to us, but we have some theological training and often isn't if you're sitting in the pews, and that is the reason for divorce in the first place. The law that Moses gave was to protect women, because men could divorce them for absolutely any reason, you know.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think it's always good to mention that actually it was there for a good reason in the first place. It was as a protection for women. And, you know, even today, there is an element that women need protecting in certain fields. The thing that really struck me, and I will never forget it, is you talked about whether divorce was sin.
Okay. I can't remember
You
much of this, to be honest.
remember that?
That's like quite a good sermon, but apparently I preached it, so that's fine.
Yeah. And we like to shy away from that, but the answer, of course, is yes. Of course it is, because if it goes against the order of what God wants, which it does, and the product of sin is hurt and upset, and nobody gets out of a divorce without some hurt and upset and some anger, all those things which obviously are products of sin. Even if you've initiated the divorce, you don't get out of it without having some of that. But it's not the unforgivable sin.
Yeah, yeah. I
And
did
I
do
think,
say that.
yeah, and I remember, because of course there are some people in the church that, and in the few years previous to your sermon, had treated me as though it was the
And actually
unforgivable sin.
use this passage to justify that it's the unforgivable sin, because really I think of the final verse where it says that
Yeah.
Jesus takes his disciples and says basically that, you know, if you marry another, then you commit adultery and you cause it's almost, it becomes an unforgivable sin because that becomes a state that you're living in that you then can't get out of, or that you've entered into, so therefore it becomes unforgivable. But I think you've got to see it within that, some of those wider things that, you know, that I obviously spoke about 10 years ago and actually still believe.
Yeah,
Although
and
now I have a different perspective on myself, having been through a divorce, and in even recording this video, I'm aware this is going on the internet. I don't know who's going to watch this. You know, some people who probably would judge me pretty harshly may well be watching it. But you know, I stand by that.
no, I still stand by that. And I think that's where we can pull in the little children of Jesus, you know, those final verses, those that nice and fluffy bit at the end. But actually, it really shows Jesus's relationship with the vulnerable, with children who are vulnerable, and reiterates again, you know, he is there, and we should be there caring for the vulnerable, and basically emulating them in some ways, being vulnerable so we can enter the kingdom, rather than sitting there in judgment. That it comes from a different angle, and I think that bit's quite an important part of
Yes, and I think it's interesting. It is really interesting you reflecting that back, you know, in now a very different set of circumstances that I have been through and find myself in. And obviously in recording this, I'm aware who may or may not see it. I think what I would want to say is that there are good reasons why there are divorce laws in place, and that there is a system which means that you can't do what Jesus is talking about here, or that was allowed in those days, where yes, the man could, I mean, in some of the other gospels embellish it a little bit more. Is it justifiable for a man to divorce his wife for any reason? Or, you know, that Moses said you could write a certificate of divorce. That was it. Job done. I've written it. You got nothing, wife, off you go. And that's not the situation we live in. And that's not and I'm glad we don't live in that situation. I think that was wrong. And I think divorce is horrible. And I wouldn't, you know, I think it is a horrible thing for anybody to go through, as you said. But we
You
also
don't
believe,
get out of it unscathed, do you?
we also, you know, we do believe in a God of grace, and we do believe in forgiveness. And I think, you know, the Church of England, for all its faults in this matter, has, yeah, we don't have there are some Christians and some other Christian leaders who within the church who would disagree with us. Well, you know, they're allowed to do that, but the church as a whole has come to a different mind on it. And I think that is, broadly speaking, obviously a good thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So in some ways, my sermon this week, cut and dry.
No, of course, because we never share each other's sermons, do we, and use them, so that's fine.
No, never. Well, look, it's called sharing resources.
It's absolutely, yeah.
And I'm going to say I'm borrowing this one from memory, so you know, go for it. I'm going
Fair
for
enough. And
yeah.
I think, yeah, just to go on to those sort of what seemingly more fluffy Sunday school verses actually are really important, because this is actually this can be applied in any sort of situations. This is a group of people, in this case children, who the disciples were trying to stop them coming to Jesus. And there may be all sorts of groups who we or others try to stop coming to Jesus. And, you know, I think going back to, I'd forgotten that I'd said the bit you raised at the beginning. Obviously, I must have said that at the time because you remember from what I said, but about it not being a debate. And of course, there's another debate going on in the church around human sexuality and the LGBTQI plus community. And again, I mean, without getting into that too heavily on this podcast, we must always remember when we're dealing pastorally with people that this is not just a debate, and that's still very much current. And I think applying the stuff in the let the little children come to me stuff, I think we have a much better understanding of that now, that we don't want to do that, but there may well still be other groups who we will prevent and put barriers in the way of them coming to receive God's love and mercy and forgiveness in all that we need in all of our lives. So
it is true.
those two things to think about for now, aren't there?
Yeah, I think for the purpose of this sermon, I am going to just stick with divorce, stick with the sermon text as it is, rather than the other groups that are also being well again.
But I think it's an interesting thing to make a point of on this discussion.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the other thing I want to say is that, you know, really aware that there may well be people watching this who, I'm sure there will be people who, for this, I know there will be people watching this who this will be a, you know, deeply personal matter. And, you know, I'm sure Jenny and I both want to say, look, our door's always open. You know, we want to, we're quite honest about our stories and what we've gone through in different parts of our lives. And, you know, don't feel you can't come and talk to us from either Holy Trinity or St. Margaret's.
We are here. We are here.
Yeah. So a bit of a whistle stop into a very complex subject, to be fair, isn't it? But yeah, as I say, you want to carry the conversation on? Carry the conversation on. We're here to do that.
Let's move on.
Do we move on? Okay, so we're going to move on and look at some verses from Deuteronomy, chapter. I'm just looking over here because it's on my other screen, so forgive me.
I've got mine on my other screen today.
24 and verse 19. So I'm just gonna fire that up on the Bible that is on the screen. So I've just got to find that. Deuteronomy 24 and verse 19. And I think this is actually a fantastic passage. Now, we were just looking just now, weren't we, to say that I don't know where I got this passage from, why I chose it. It's not in the lectionary. I don't know if it's the lectionary for Harvest. I think it must have been in some Harvest resources. And I thought, That's a really good passage of harvest, so that's what we're going to look at. So here
Not
it's
even the
harvest,
harvest lectionary. You have
not even
just
the
made
harvest
it.
lectionary. That's just the rebel that I am, Jenny. Just the rebel that I am. As you know, I love breaking the rules. That's
Oh yeah.
well known for it. Anyway, so this is just the 3 verses from Deuteronomy 24:19.
What
And
we got 19 to
you want to go with
22.
it? So it's from here. Look, can you see?
I've got it. When you reap your harvest in your field and forget a sheaf in the field, you shall not go back to get it. It shall be left for the alien, the orphan, and the widow, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all your undertakings. When you beat your olive trees, do not strip what is left. It shall be for the alien, the orphan, and the widow. When you gather the grapes of your vineyard, do not glean what is left. It shall be for the alien, the orphan, and the widow. Remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore, I am commanding you to do this. It's a really
So
good passage,
to
isn't
read
it?
the words alien, orphan, and widow. It's like a chorus,
Orphan.
isn't it? It's like a chorus.
Yeah, it says it over again. It's yeah, it's very poetic, isn't it?
Yeah, repetition. It's really bad in the church. You don't want to do any of that.
Repetition, it's really bad in the church. You don't want to do any of that.
Of course, it's repetition for a reason, very much. Well, of course, as it always is, but yeah, it's sort of hammering the point home, isn't it?
But I was stating the obvious, but yes, thank you.
Well, okay, there you go. Thank you.
Yeah, obviously.
Obviously. But what is the point that it's hammering home, and how do we take it forward today? I mean, I think that I kind of, obviously, again, this is the kind of context-based thing, isn't it? Because this is very much in an agrarian society. Everyone's everyone's either a farmer or is working on the land in some way, whereas we're completely, and that's of course one of the challenges about harvest, especially in East London, where I am now, even compared to where I was before in rural Nottinghamshire, where, I was much closer to the whole harvest thing, and it was a much bigger deal, although actually it is quite a big deal in St Margaret, which is just great. But yeah, we're a bit one step removed from that. Most of us, aren't we? You've got food from Sainsbury's, but go on. Yeah, am I boring
Let me
you?
tell you why I like it. When you said, "Oh, I'm doing this," and I went, "Yes, do this one,"
Okay.
even though it's not the lectionary reading. I'll just say that again.
Okay, not the lecture reading. We got
it's
that.
not the lectionary reading. I like it because it underpins what I was doing in the community pantry up in the northeast.
Okay.
I like it because it's leaving stuff behind. So instead of taking all you've got and then handing it out in like a charity case type way, it's more subtle than that. Leave it and they'll come and fetch it, and also requires some effort for the people that haven't got anything. So the aliens, the orphans, the widows still have to do something, which gives themselves some self-worth. So it stops the giving being charitable giving in that way. So they have some self-worth, and they also have to make a bit of effort. And that's very similar to what I was trying to set up in a community pantry. There are many churches and many organisations that will give out free things to people who are in need, or probably they always say in need.
The needy. The needy.
The needy. But it became a bit of, in my mind, a bit of a power play. And you will have heard me say everybody likes to feed a poor person. Through COVID, I had more food to give out than I could give out, but nobody would pay for the petrol in the car or the heating in the church or anything like that, so that we could do something with this. But everybody liked to give food because they like the idea that they're feeding someone. And it is quite a, as I say, a bit of a power play.
Yeah. And folks, this is one of the reasons why this, in conversation with, as well as we hope being useful for you as you listen, is brilliant sermon prep for us, because I'm not sure I'd have got to this point, but what Jenny's just said, I think is really interesting, that, it's easy to look at this this teaching as it is, I suppose, in Deuteronomy from I suppose the question is, whose perspective do you look at it from, actually? For me, it's easy to look at it from the perspective of the landowner, the rich one who's getting out, and and of course, I used to work in the food production industry, actually. So I was involved in modern food processing for a while. And of course, things around efficiency and lack of wastage and yield are absolutely critical when you're working in agriculture or food production. So one of the major things that we were measured on when I was working in a dairy was the wastage, and we had to get it below 1%. Now, I'm not suggesting that, so it's essentially, so this goes completely against that kind of idea of, you've got to make sure that you're as efficient as possible, that you get everything as much as you can. And that's actually, we understand that that's actually the heart of a lot of agriculture and food production. If you watch Clarkson's Farm, they will talk about the yield. What's the yield we got off this, and
But I would then say, but you were talking about wastage at that point, but then so much food is wasted throughout the process.
Yeah.
Because it gets wasted from warehouses.
But
and
I think what I'm taking from
Mm.
your thing is as well is it's also looking at it from the point of view of the people who are doing, and those questions around self-worth and what that gives, which I think is again really interesting.
And am I right in thinking that you will be doing all age? Because
I will be doing all age, yeah. So I've got to think of some exciting, interactive way of engaging everyone. I don't know what that's going to be yet. Might be something to do with wastage. We're going to have to think about probably making a mess in the church somewhere. But anyway, that's just going to be my task for the next few days out of this, really.
Oh yeah, you could walk around and just kind of throw things down.
I could throw like seeds and soil, and then my poor church wardens who probably might be
and then everyone could come and gather it up.
Gather it all up, wouldn't they? Yeah.
What about if you were eating sweets and you just dropped sweets?
Yeah. Okay.
As you walked along.
Okay. Well, we'll see. If you're in the Barking area on Sunday and you want to see how this turns out, you need to come to St Margaret's at 11 o'clock for our harvest service. And I think one of the great things, in fact, that we do there is we're going to have a bring and share lunch afterwards. And, actually that's really good. St Margaret's is really good at that. And, there's always loads of food. And actually it's a real, I think, example in many ways of this principle,
Is
but
it?
I think,
how's it an example of this
because
principle?
there might be people will bring more food than they need to eat themselves, and there'll be enough to go around. Which isn't okay. It's not strictly, from one to the other, but
then you're heading towards charity case, aren't you? It's the opposite, really, isn't it?
Okay.
It is. I would suggest, not that you have to take it, that a good challenge for your congregation would be how could they go and do this without people noticing? How would they be able to do it? And I'm thinking of the people that leave a pound coin in the trolleys or something like that. In fact, I've heard a story of school teachers that used to set a task for their children, like to be polite, and they would win something so it was like a secret task. And then
think about random acts of kindness and paying it forward.
Yeah, but like so their secret task would be to hold doors open. And if on Friday somebody had said to that teacher, "Do you know what? Your children are really good at holding doors open," without ever, then they would win something. So they had to do it. But that kind of secret acts of kindness.
Okay.
How could they do it? That
could be interesting, couldn't it? Okay, I've got getting my brain whirring now around what to do on Sunday. Something, but I think this is a really interesting challenge, actually, to our hyper efficient kind of culture. Squeeze the last drop out of everything you've got. Obviously, we're thinking about it in terms of harvest. But that obviously I'm not a farmer, so it's not, I'm not leaving things on the field. But how do we, as people who want to put some of these principles into practice, those are some practical ways that you can do this. And how do you get away from the charity thing? Just say a little bit more about that, because I think that's really interesting and really challenging and quite difficult.
It is really difficult. It flows through our church culture, but to be honest, having worked with a lot of other charities, it just flows through culture that people they like to give, and we kind of have that thing, it's good to give,
and it is good to give.
And it is good to
It is.
give, but you have to be considerate of how people are going to receive it, I think is the answer. How do we go about? I mean, you can do this sort of thing. You can give to the food bank. You can give to the, other ways. But I think we very much like to provide, because if it makes you feel better because you can see somebody getting a benefit, then you're probably doing it for the wrong reason.
Okay, well, there's an
And
interesting
that is
challenge.
harsh,
Please
but
do
it's
still
true.
bring your food for the food bank on Sunday because we want to make a collection. I mean, I don't think it's wrong. It'd be crazy.
Well, I think with the food bank, you're not seeing them straight away get the food, are you? So you are kind of doing it secretly.
Okay, yeah. Yeah,
Um,
I think what I understand from having talked about this, the danger is that the danger is robbing people of their self-respect, isn't it?
yes, very much so.
How do we walk that? That's a difficult balance to walk. That's a difficult balance to walk. But it's being aware of it, of course, is the first step to answering it, isn't it? Some sort of a level of self-awareness
Yeah,
around it.
and I think maybe it goes back to the other reading. That wasn't a pastoral. How you debate is how you how talk differently into a pastoral situation. And again, once you're aware of it, you will say different things. You will speak differently. You won't come across as the person that's got everything that don't worry, we'll come and save you. You'll just be more aware. And I do think it's important. I think we are developing a culture, a dependency culture of quite a big portion of our society. And there's no easy way out of it. We can't just kind of cut off all help and kind of go, oh no, you're on your own now. But also we need to be aware that we are making people dependent on us. And
that could
that's
bring its own dangers. Yeah. So just a few verses there from Deuteronomy that I think actually give us a lot to pause and reflect on, don't we? How do we put some of these principles of not gleaning right to the edges and leaving things for other people, and or if we, how do we make sure that if we're coming from the other perspective that we maintain our own self-respect and don't sort of slide into that.
They are good verses. I might use them for harvest.
Do you think so?
They are good verses, yeah. Just don't know where you found them.
Yes. I don't know. I can't remember. When I was doing the rota. Oh, yeah. Go me. There we are. Yeah. Folks, that is about time. So there we are. I hope you've enjoyed another time with us. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to give us some feedback, we'd love to hear from you. So you know how to get in touch.
Feedback. We like nice feedback. We like
obviously nice feedback, but whatever feedback,
if you've got critical feedback, give it to Mark. I'll just hear the nice things.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So be nice to Jenny.
It's a partnership.
We're gonna sign off now, and hopefully we'll see you soon. And we will be back next week. And then we're having a week off, but we will be here next week.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Bye.